Under the soot of London's rail bridges and the glare of New York's trading floors, a baton changed hands. Not in a single moment, and not in a single battle. It moved through ledgers, treaties, convoys, and the quiet confidence that other nations had in a country's courts and money. Britain to the United States is the most consequential handoff in modern economic history. It matters now because we see the same mechanics at work in 2024 and 2025. Shipping lanes repriced by risk, defense budgets rising to ensure trade, and technology rules written upstream where a handful of firms and governments set standards. If we can see how the baton moved a century ago, we can read the signals in front of us with more calm and less noise. Here's the frame. Great powers tend to rise when they align productive capacity with credible finance and enforceable rules, then pay the bill to keep trade flowing. They slip when debts outrun income, when politics clouds credibility, or when rivals master the next technology or organizational innovation. The British cycle turned on coal, shipyards, the gold standard, and a state that could borrow reliably. The American cycle scaled that model with a continent-sized market, deep capital pools, and, after two world wars, a financial and security architecture that others chose to use. This is not destiny. It is design and discipline, compounded over decades. Start with Britain at its apogee. By the 19th century, coal and steam had shattered old limits, canals and railways had collapsed inland freight costs, and the Royal Navy underwrote global trade routes. London offered what merchants and governments prized most: predictable money and courts. By 1821, Britain had restored gold convertibility, anchoring confidence in sterling for a long century of commerce. In the background, a fiscal military state, built after 1688 with Parliament's power over taxation and borrowing, made it possible to finance long wars without serial default. The result was a system that other countries used because it was cheaper and safer than the alternatives. Insurance premia, freight rates, and discount windows reflected an assumption. If trouble came, the British would show up. The American rise began as an experiment in scale and energy, then accelerated in crisis. During World War I, the United States crossed a financial Rubicon, shifting from debtor to creditor as European powers borrowed heavily in New York. Between the wars, the U.S. deepened its industrial base and, despite the trauma of the Great Depression, consolidated capital markets that could marshal savings at a national scale. Lend-Lease in 1941 signaled something larger than materiel transfers. It showed that the American state could convert industrial capacity and credit into system-level influence. By 1944, the blueprint for a new monetary order was drafted at Bretton Woods. After the war, the United States backed reconstruction and trade with dollars other countries wanted to hold, and with a security umbrella that kept sea lanes open. When current account convertibility was restored across advanced economies in 1958, the machinery clicked into place. Even when the gold link broke in 1971, deep and open capital markets, rule of law courts, and the sheer scale of U.S. finance kept the dollar at the center. What precisely did the United States add to Britain's template? First, size and diversity. A continental economy could absorb shocks, channel labor and capital across regions, and exploit network effects in rail, telegraph, highways, and later digital infrastructure. Second, institutional breadth. A federal system with independent regulators and courts proved resilient enough to be credible to outsiders over many administrations. Third, technological leadership. From mass production and aviation to semiconductors and software, the United States repeatedly hosted critical nodes of innovation, often clustering talent, capital, and suppliers in ways rivals found hard to replicate. The baton did not drop. It was passed, then welded onto a larger frame. Now place that story next to the dashboard of 2024 to 2025. The price of security is rising and it shows up everywhere. World military spending reached a record in 2024, with the steepest year-on-year increase since the end of the Cold War. The shipping map is still distorted by Red Sea risks. In the first quarter of 2025, Suez Canal transits were reported down by roughly half from a year earlier, and Egypt's 2024 canal revenues plunged from the 2023 record. Ports at the end of those routes feel the drag. Europe's largest port, Rotterdam, posted a 4.1% decline in throughput in the first half of 2025, even as container TEUs held up better than bulk. Those are not local stories, they are the global invoice for deterrence, rerouting, and delay. Finance remains the American advantage and the American responsibility. The dollar still anchors official reserves, hovering near 58% at the turn of 2025, despite recurrent talk of alternatives. New York remains the top financial center, and while London narrowed the gap in early 2025, the deepest pools of dollar liquidity still sit in U.S. markets. Economic momentum has been mixed but resilient. The U.S. economy expanded in late 2024, even as interest costs rose and the business cycle matured. And upstream in the technology stack, policy is targeting choke points. In 2024, the U.S. government finalized multi-billion-dollar CHIPS Act awards with leading chipmakers to onshore capacity, signaling that 21st century industrial policy will be judged by whether critical tools and fabs are inside friendly jurisdictions. Those moves echo older cycles. Rules and subsidies are being used to shape where key inputs live and under what terms others can access them. The rest of the world is not static. China remains the most formidable manufacturing network ever assembled, with scale in batteries, solar, and mid-tech industries, even as its property sector, demographics, and local government finances pose headwinds. Europe is rearming and rethinking industrial competitiveness. Energy trade patterns are being rewritten by both conflict and the energy transition. Policy uncertainty is unusually high. The World Trade Organization's Spring 2025 outlook flagged the risk of weaker goods trade amid tariffs and rerouting. In short, the world is repricing reliability and asking who can provide it at tolerable cost. Where does the historical rhyme fit, and where does it break? It rhymes in three important ways. First, credibility still compounds. When a state can borrow cheaply and predictably, it can buy time. Time for shipyards, grids, and fabs to be built. Time for allies to coordinate. Time for supply chains to adapt. Second, logistics and law still beat raw size over time. Britain did not dominate the 19th century because it was largest. America was already larger by the late 1800s. It dominated because its rules and routes were preferred. Today, the players that clear payments reliably in stress, enforce contracts consistently for foreigners, and keep cargoes moving at lower variants will be the ones others choose. Third, handoffs are gradual. Sterling did not vanish when the dollar rose. It coexisted, then receded. Expect overlapping systems rather than a switch flipped in the night. But the differences matter. Speed compresses everything. A regulatory note in Washington can shift capital expenditure plans in East Asia within a quarter. A missile attack at sea can change inventory strategies in Europe within a week. Standards are digital as much as physical: cloud architectures, data regimes, telecom protocols, and chip toolchains that can scale faster than ships or railways ever could. And constraints are tighter. Aging populations in advanced economies, climate shocks, and grid bottlenecks limit how quickly capacity can be added. That means policy missteps are punished faster, and institutional trust has to be earned continuously, not assumed. So what are the practical implications of the Britain to United States handoff for today? For businesses, redundancy is a feature, not a bug. In the 17th century, the Floyd cut costs. Today, dual sourcing, nearshoring, and strategic inventories lower the risk of catastrophic delay. Margins may look thinner quarter to quarter. Resilience earns a premium across the cycle. For investors, watch the boring capacity: shipyards, dry docks, rail links, terminal equipment, transmission lines, and the upstream industrial kit behind semiconductors and energy. As the cost of protection rises, these assets re-rate from cyclical to strategic. For policymakers, the lesson is to invest in credibility and throughput. Courts that resolve disputes quickly, regulators who make timelines predictable, and permitting that moves ports, grids, and fabs from drawing board to groundbreak at speed, all are part of power. And for citizens, the best indicators are close to home. When a data center breaks ground near your town, when a battery plant hires, when a port expands its cranes or a rail yard adds capacity, you are seeing the cycle in your backyard. It is also worth saying what this story does not predict. It does not demand a single hegemon in every domain. Networks allow for specialization. Smaller states that master a pivotal layer, lithography tools, standards bodies, commodity trading, high-end insurance, can wield leverage out of proportion to size. nor does the story guarantee decline for incumbents. Britain remained essential after the handoff, just as the Netherlands remained essential when London rose. Relative share can shift while absolute capability grows. The key variable is whether a country keeps compounding its institutional advantages faster than the costs of security and coordination are rising. If you want one sentence to carry forward, take this. A power leads when others prefer its money, its law, and its logistics, especially when seas are rough. Britain taught that in the 19th century. The United States proved it in the 20th and into the 21st. The present stress test, rerouted ships, record defense budgets, contested standards, will reveal who still provides those services at the right price and with the right credibility. So far, the system still runs on dollars, U.S. capital markets, and U.S.-aligned security guarantees, even as alternative hubs and tools proliferate. That mix can evolve. It has before. In our next episode, we zoom out from a single handoff to the toolbox behind every rise. We will unpack the 8 determinants of power, the recurring ingredients that show up whenever a country climbs the ranks. From education and innovation to fiscal capacity, the rule of law, resource position, military reach, social cohesion, and the credibility to knit them together. We will use them as a checklist to read the next decade with more confidence. Before you go, I want to hear from you. What are you seeing in your city? Are ships arriving later at your local port, or do rail yards feel busier? Are new rules or inspection fees showing up on your invoices? Is a data center, battery plant, or defense supplier hiring in your region? Are firms splitting operations across countries to hedge risk? Share what you're noticing in the comments. Your ground truth, prices, delays, job postings, helps us map the great transition as it actually unfolds.